Dr. Milo Voss always said he signed up for plants, not pantsless giants. And yet here he was, kneeling in alien moss, shipwrecked, ego bruised, and staring up at 9 feet of silver-skinned muscle packed into what looked suspiciously like ceremonial lingerie. Zelvara tilted her head, nostrils flaring. You emit strong pheromones, Earth male. The scent of virile potential. Acceptable. Milo blinked. That's just my deodorant. Fresh Forest Frenzy. Limited edition. She stepped forward, and he backed into a glowing rock. Fear not. The convergence begins gently. She unhooked her shoulder armor with a click that echoed like a loaded gun. Whoa. Time out. I'm not ready for any converging. I've got a concussion, space chafing, and I'm 99% sure you just licked your lips. Zelvara leaned in, her breath warm and oddly sweet. Your refusal is traditional foreplay. The resisting male heightens the climax ritual. I'm pleased. Milo swallowed. Lady, I resist out of genuine terror, not custom. She tapped her bracelet. Vitals show excellent circulation. Stimulus confirmed. That's called panic. Entirely non-erotic, I assure you. She held up a scroll-like tablet and recited, Step 1, observe the mate's vessel. She looked down, then up. Your pod is compact, but promising. Stop evaluating my pod. She squatted in front of him, golden eyes gleaming. Step 2, initiate primary probing. Nope. No probing. Not today. Not tomorrow. Not until I've had breakfast and therapy. She paused. You require fuel. Yes. Ritual feasting. She retrieved what looked like a steaming purple slab and held it out. What is that? Cooked root of the fertility tree. Milo sniffed it. It smells like feet and armpit had a love child. High in stamina enzymes. Low in human dignity. She frowned, clearly unsure if that was a compliment. Eat? He nibbled. It was spicy. Spicier than heartbreak. Okay, wow, that's internal combustion levels of heat. She smiled. Good. Your core temperature rises. I think my intestines are melting. Excellent preparation for penetration. Milo choked. Lady, you're gonna have to be more specific with that word. Where I'm from, it has implications. She gently gripped his bicep. Her hand covered most of his upper body. Relax. I shall initiate docking. He yelped. Listen, where I'm from, docking means something very specific. And not safe for public forums. Her eyes narrowed. Then your culture reveres the act? Reveres? No. Avoids like unpaid taxes. She touched her temple. Beginning penance protocol alpha. He flinched. That's not calming. From a hatch behind her, a long vine slithered forward. Milo froze. Is that thing alive? Restraint root. Only necessary if the subject exhibits extreme denial. He sprang up. Listen, Zell, can I call you Zell? I think there's been a massive translation error. I am not your penance partner. I am a scientist. I'm here for botany. Ah, foreplay through roleplay. Intriguing. He paced, gesturing wildly. No. I'm serious. My mission log literally says study plant reproduction. Not participate in it. She rose, towering above him. You fear me. Well, yes. You could bench press a rhino. I only press when I'm pleased. He backed into a tree. Okay. Let's just slow things down. Like, glacial speed. Do you have chairs? Maybe we can just talk? Her eyes lit up. Verbal seduction phase. Proceed. Milo sighed. This is going downhill faster than a greased asteroid. She placed a hand on his chest, over his heart. It races. Because I'm terrified. Perfect. Step 3, accelerated pulse confirms readiness. That's not how science works. She leaned closer, her hair brushing his face like silk. It's been 20 years, Milo Voss. 2 cycles of isolation. I've had no touch, no exchange of warmth, no exploration. He tried to look anywhere but her eyes or anything else. So buy a weighted blanket. Hug a cactus. There are options. She ignored that. You are the first compatible mate to breach my perimeter. You will satisfy the ritual. You're not giving me a choice, are you? Her mouth curved. Consent is implied by arrival. That's not how consent works either. She blinked. Then, you reject me? Milo hesitated. Her tone wasn't angry. It was sad. He looked up. Past the warrior, past the curves and confidence, and saw someone tired. Someone alone. He exhaled. No. I'm saying we should maybe figure this out before one of us ends up emotionally or physically imploded. Zelvara tilted her head again. Your species negotiates connection? Sometimes. We're awkward, emotionally constipated, but we try. She stepped back, thoughtful. Then let us try, your way. Milo nodded. Okay. Good. Step 1, no vines, no probes, no root food. Just sitting. She sat. He sat. They stared. After a pause, she whispered, Do we speak now? He smirked. Only if you want to hear about my tragic breakup with a Venusian fern. She smiled. Begin, Earth male. Let your words penetrate. He groaned. You're doing that on purpose now, aren't you? Perhaps. And for the first time, Milo laughed. A real laugh. The kind you make when you realize you're not dead. Yet. Milo sat cross-legged on what he hoped wasn't a mating altar, trying not to panic as Zelvara flipped through her ancient mating scroll with the confidence of someone reading a cookbook. She hummed softly. Step 4, evaluate the subject's endurance threshold. He cleared his throat. Endurance for what? Because I'm great at board games and terrible at cardio. She didn't even blink. We'll begin with the flexibility calibration. Okay, that's not a phrase humans use outside of yoga classes and adult films. She looked genuinely puzzled. Are you not a pleasure-certified male? I'm a PhD in exobotany. Her eyebrow twitched. That does not sound satisfying. Depends on the plant. Zelvara crouched beside him, holding a container filled with glowing blue liquid. This is internal friction reducer. Milo grimaced. You mean, lubricant? She nodded. For your joints, of course. Right. Joints. Totally. No other application whatsoever. She dipped her fingers into the gel and reached for his shoulder. You appear tense. That's because I've been threatened with restraint vines, misdiagnosed with arousal, and I'm 90% sure this whole thing's being live-streamed back to your council. No, only recorded. For later performance review. Fantastic. Galactic HR is gonna love this. She began massaging his shoulder, surprisingly gentle. You are compact. Yet resilient. Like a compressed battle ration. I've been called worse. Her fingers traced along his neck, and his entire nervous system tried to activate the eject button. You shiver. Is it fear or anticipation? Both. I'm a multitasker. She tilted her head. Interesting. Human males tremble before mating? Only when things escalate faster than the speed of consent. Zell paused, finally sensing the tension wasn't entirely the good kind. Explain. Do you not wish to fulfill the ritual? I don't even know what the ritual is. Your instructions sound like IKEA manuals written by horny poets. She blinked. Then we must begin again. Step 1, Observation. I've been very observed, thank you. My dignity's in witness protection. Step 2, Verbal arousal sequence. Wait, what? Compliment the mate's physique. Milo cleared his throat. You're extremely toned. Like a sexy tank. Acceptable. Now I return the favor. Please don't. You have oddly placed hair, limited bone density, and your reproductive glands are externally vulnerable. Fascinating. That's not a compliment, that's a threat assessment. She smiled. Compliments vary by species. Milo stood abruptly. Okay, we're skipping steps. Let's talk about this convergence ceremony. What does it actually involve? A fusion of body heat, hormonal resonance, and possibly screaming. Again, terrifying. It's not fatal. That's not as comforting as you think it is. She approached him slowly. I've read the ancient texts. They speak of deep insertion of truth, mutual groaning, and synchronized spasms. Milo stared at her. You're describing a gym session or a very weird sermon. She leaned in. My people lack emotional climax. We only know physical culmination. Your presence, it changes that. You mean I accidentally triggered your first awkward crush? She stepped back, visibly confused. You joke. Is this part of the human arousal ritual? No, this is part of the I'm panicking and using humor to stay alive ritual. She nodded solemnly. You are a brave male. I'm a deeply confused one. Zelvara began pacing. I was told my partner would resist, but eventually surrender. That's problematic phrasing. Why? Because consent isn't about eventual surrender. It's about mutual understanding. She stopped pacing. Then, explain. What do humans do? We talk. We flirt. We share stories. We might kiss, or hold hands, or binge stupid shows until we laugh too hard and something clicks. She considered that. We have none of that. Just instructions, hormone triggers, and final reports. Sounds sterile. It is. Efficient. But cold. And you want something warmer? She nodded. But I do not know how. Milo sighed, then took a breath. Okay. Lesson 1. Compliments, human style. Your eyes are intense but kind. Your laugh, when I heard it, is weirdly charming. And despite the looming doom vibes, you seem lonely. She blinked rapidly. That was accurate. Yeah, we're good at reading between the lines. Comes from a history of bad dates. She stepped closer, softer this time. Then teach me more. No scrolls? No scrolls. No performance metrics? Only feelings. He raised an eyebrow. And no more probes? Unless requested. He smiled. Now you're getting it. They sat again, this time closer. Her arm brushed his, and she didn't flinch. Neither did he. Her breathing slowed. She tilted her head. Tell me more of this, binging. Well, there's this show about 6 friends in a coffee shop. She listened, head resting on one hand, completely focused. Milo chuckled. You know, this might be the weirdest first date in human history. She smiled. Then let it be memorable. Zelvara didn't sleep. Not really. She entered what her species called neural recharge mode, which looked suspiciously like meditating while levitating slightly off the ground. Milo, on the other hand, was curled in the fetal position under what he hoped was a blanket and not ceremonial hide. He opened one eye and saw her watching him, unblinking. Morning, he croaked. Assuming time still matters. You emitted 76 microgroans during your rest. Is that normal? I call it dreaming. My spine calls it regret. She floated down, graceful and quiet. Your energy is low. Would you like more fertility root stew? I'd rather eat my own socks. She considered. They are fibrous. Possible nutrition. Not a suggestion. Just my way of saying I'm fine. She crouched beside him. I believe I overstimulated your system. Understatement of the century. My cortisol levels were doing interpretive dance. She gently placed her hand on his forehead. You remain warm. I'm human. We're warm-blooded. Also, you stress me out. You stimulate unexpected responses in me as well. Milo sat up. Define unexpected. My species does not crave repetition. Yet I desire further interaction. Not just convergence. Prolonged exposure. You want a relationship. I want to keep talking. He blinked. Wow. Okay. Didn't expect to be anyone's first boyfriend/science experiment. I feel calmer near you. And agitated when you move away. I do not know what this is. It's called emotional dependency. Extremely inconvenient and hard to explain at parties. She nodded slowly. I wish to understand it. He stood and stretched. Then you'll need to accept something. Humans don't operate on predictable scripts. We bumble, mess up, overshare, underthink, and half our decisions are powered by caffeine and loneliness. That sounds exhausting. It is. But sometimes, it's worth it. She watched him closely. I believe you have imprinted on my neuroempathy core. Is that your version of catching feelings? Yes. And it appears contagious. He grinned. Welcome to the chaos. She paused. There is another issue. Of course there is. My internal regulators are fluctuating. My biology is adapting to yours. I'm entering phase 3. Why does that sound like a video game boss level? My kind typically expel surplus bonding chemicals through violent mating. Or vaporization. Vaporization? If unbalanced. That's not sexy. She stood, her skin shimmering faintly. You calm me. But now I require recalibration. Either physical or emotional. I vote emotional. Maybe a walk? Some tea? Or you could induce laughter. You did so earlier. It was effective. He blinked. You want me to be funny? Yes. It tingled. He raised a brow. You get turned on by humor? When sincere and poorly timed. Well, buckle up. Poor timing is my specialty. He stepped back and struck a ridiculous pose. Did you hear the one about the alien who confused a space botanist with a pleasure technician? She nodded. He survived. Barely. Right. So, I'm doing great so far. She covered her mouth. A giggle slipped out, soft, unexpected, musical. His jaw dropped. Was that a laugh? I believe so. My chest spasmed. That's actually how it works. She placed a hand on her abdomen. I like it. Do more. He began narrating his crash with exaggerated flair. I landed on this rock thinking, Milo, you've hit bottom. And then you showed up, looking like the cover of Space Warriors Illustrated, asking about my pod size. Another giggle. And then you tried to marinate me in gel, tie me to a tree, and called it foreplay. Her laugh grew louder. Next thing I know, I'm eating foot soup and dodging probing equipment labeled for enhanced satisfaction. She burst into full laughter, stumbling slightly. He stopped, genuinely amazed. You really like that? It feels freeing. And pleasurable. More than rituals. More than the convergence prep. He approached her carefully. Then maybe what you needed wasn't a mate. Maybe you needed a connection. She tilted her head. A connection without collision? Exactly. Not everything has to be an explosion. Though those are still enjoyable. Noted. But now you're balancing. See? Humor is the pressure valve. She touched his arm. I feel less volatile. You stabilize me. You make me a legend in human awkward survival stories. We are compatible. Against all odds. She looked down. Do you intend to stay? He hesitated, then smiled. Do you intend to let me leave? I don't know. Then I'll stay. For now. We'll take it one weird bonding ritual at a time. She smiled again. Agreed. Shall we calibrate again? He smirked. With or without vines? I shall let you choose the setting. Now we're really getting somewhere. Milo had almost adjusted to life with Zelvara, almost. The awkwardness of their first few encounters had melted into a strange rhythm of humor, misunderstanding, and surprisingly, real connection. But today was different. Today, things were escalating, and he wasn't sure if he was ready for the next phase of their bonding. I feel it, she said, her voice low and serious. The pressure in my core. It's increasing. Milo froze, his fingers still wrapped around his data pad. Okay, that sounds like a bad thing. Zelvara stood tall, her figure glowing faintly. It's the result of prolonged exposure. Your presence, your unique scent, is stimulating the biological processes. He rubbed his forehead. Yeah, that was never on my orientation packet. Seriously, is there a space manual for how to not set off a 9-foot alien's hormones? She looked at him with a mixture of concern and confusion. I am told it is natural. But it feels uncomfortable. I require your help. Milo winced. Of course you do. And I bet it's not the kind of help I was trained for, right? Correct. She stepped closer, her large, dark eyes locking onto his. Your species is so flexible. You can adapt. But this, Milo, this is beyond my control. Milo didn't like the sound of that. The last time he heard those words, he found himself tied to a tree. Look, Zell, I'm just a scientist. Not your personal, emotional support animal. You are much more than that to me. She took a deep breath. You have bonded with my essence. I must recalibrate, and you must guide me through the process. Without it, I could destabilize. Milo took a step back, his brain firing on all cylinders. Recalibrate? Wait, you mean physically? Emotionally, yes. But also, physically, she said, her voice suddenly heavy with meaning. Your influence has merged with mine. I need you. Milo's brain short-circuited for a second. He could already feel the sweat beading on his neck. Look, you're not going to vaporize me, right? You know, for being too emotionally available or whatever? She didn't even blink. No, Milo. I need to understand. You have opened something in me, and I am unsure how to close it. Well, if it's an emotional thing, I'm your guy, he said, trying to diffuse the tension. I'm really good at talking. I talk my way out of every bad situation I've ever been in. Her gaze softened slightly, but there was a flicker of doubt in her eyes. It's not just talking, Milo. It's deeper. My biological instincts are pulling me in directions I do not understand. I've never felt this before. You have caused a shift in me. Great, he muttered, half to himself. I've managed to break an alien's biology. Wonderful. She didn't find his sarcasm funny. This is serious. My species, we. Yeah, he interrupted, now fully aware of the gravity of the situation. Look, I'm just saying, we need to slow down. Maybe. I don't know, talk? Like, actually talk about this instead of diving into the deep end of calibrating whatever? Zelvara blinked slowly. I have tried. But I do not know how to stop. He opened his mouth to argue but quickly closed it. He could see the vulnerability in her posture, the frustration in her eyes. Whatever was happening, it wasn't something she had control over. And that realization hit him hard. Okay, listen, Milo started, softer this time, I get it. You don't want to lose control. I don't want you to. But recalibration? I don't think that's something we should rush into. She stared at him for a long moment, her body tense. Finally, she spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. You are the only one who can help me, but it must be done properly. Together. Milo felt a strange weight on his chest. There was something about the way she said together that made his heart race in a way that had nothing to do with fear. He wanted to say something, to offer a solution, but the words just wouldn't come. Zelvara took a step closer, her fingers barely brushing against his arm. I feel your hesitation. I understand. But we are in this now, whether you are ready or not. His stomach tightened, and despite every instinct telling him to back away, he stayed rooted in place. She was right. They were in this. Together. I don't know what you want from me, he said finally. But if there's a way to fix this, to help you, then I'll do it. I'm not just gonna leave you like this. Zelvara's eyes softened, and she looked almost relieved. You do not have to fix it. Just be present. That is all I need. Okay, Milo said, taking a deep breath. Then let's figure this out. They stood there for a few moments, the silence hanging heavy between them, until finally, Zelvara spoke again. I believe. I need more than what I have been taught, she said quietly. More than rituals. More than instincts. I need something real. Milo's heart skipped a beat. Something real? Yes. She nodded slowly. Something beyond all the confusion. Something that doesn't just satisfy biology, but the soul. Okay, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. Then we'll do that. We'll figure it out. No more rituals. Just real. Zelvara's expression softened, her body language shifting. The tension in her had finally begun to ease, and for the first time since their strange encounter began, there was a sense of calm. I trust you, she said, the words spoken with a sincerity that made his chest tighten. More than I have trusted anyone. Milo felt the weight of that trust settle on him like a warm cloak. He didn't know how to handle it, but somehow, just being there, just listening, seemed to be enough. And maybe, just maybe, it was all he could give her. All he needed to. I won't let you down, he said quietly. For the first time in what felt like forever, Milo allowed himself to believe it.